What happens when two of entertainment's biggest personalities clash on live television? The answer is messier than anyone could have predicted. Mariah Carey, the legendary diva, known for her 5-octave range and record-breaking hits, sat down with Jimmy Kimmel for what was supposed to be a lighthearted promotional interview. Instead, it turned into one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night history, ending with Mariah walking off the set in front of a stunned studio audience. Before we get into exactly what went wrong, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me whose side you're on in this situation. Trust me, you're going to need to pick a side. The interview started, normally enough. Jimmy welcomed Mariah to the stage with his usual enthusiasm, and she took her seat with that signature confident smile she's known for. The audience was excited, clapping and cheering as Jimmy launched into his first question about her upcoming album. Mariah answered graciously, talking about her creative process and how this project was deeply personal to her. Everything seemed fine. Jimmy was engaged, Mariah was charming, and the conversation flowed naturally. But then, something shifted. Jimmy leaned back in his chair and said, "So Mariah, I have to ask. There's been a lot of talk online about your New Year's Eve performance from a few years back. You know the one I'm talking about." The audience laughed nervously, and you could see Mariah's expression change immediately. Her smile tightened, and she tilted her head slightly, a classic sign that she was not amused. She responded coolly saying, "Well Jimmy, I think we've all moved past that, haven't we? It was a technical difficulty, and I handled it with grace. I'm here to talk about my new music, not revisit old moments that have already been explained." Jimmy, sensing the tension but seemingly unable to resist, pressed forward. He said, I know, but come on, it was pretty wild. The internet had a field day with it. People are still making memes. Don't you think it's funny looking back on it now?" Mariah's face hardened. She took a breath and said, "Funny? No, Jimmy, I don't think technical sabotage is funny. I don't think being put in an impossible situation on one of the biggest nights of television is something to laugh about. I came here tonight to discuss my artistry, my music, and my career, not to be the punchline of your monologue." The audience went quiet. You could feel the energy in the room change completely. Jimmy tried to laugh it off, saying, Whoa, I'm not making you a punchline, Mariah. I'm just saying it was a memorable moment. That's all. We're just having fun here." But Mariah wasn't buying it. She leaned forward and said, "Fun for who? Jimmy, fun for you, because it certainly wasn't fun for me. Do you know what it's like to stand in front of millions of people while everything is falling apart around you, and then have people mock you for it for years? I doubt you do." Jimmy shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He tried to pivot, saying, Okay, fair point. Let's move on. Let's talk about the new album. What's the first single going to be?" But Mariah wasn't ready to move on. She interrupted him and said, "No, let's not just move on. You brought it up, so let's talk about it. Why is it that when women in this industry have technical failures or difficult moments, they become jokes? But when men do, everyone rallies around them and calls them brave. I've sold over 200 million records. I've written most of my own songs, and I'm still being reduced to a meme from one night." Jimmy raised his hands defensively and said, "I hear you, Mariah, I really do. But you have to admit, you've built a brand on being, a diva. You've embraced that image. So when something goes wrong, people are going to talk about it. That's just part of the deal." Mariah's eyes flashed with anger. She said sharply, "Being confident in my abilities and demanding excellence is not the same as being a joke, Jimmy, and the fact that you think those two things are connected is exactly the problem. I don't owe anyone self-deprecation. I don't owe anyone humility about my talent. I've earned the right to expect things to work properly." The tension was palpable now. Jimmy tried to lighten the mood by saying, All right, I get it. You're absolutely right. I shouldn't have brought it up. Let's really move forward now. Tell me about working with the producers on this album." But before Mariah could answer, Jimmy couldn't help himself. He added with a smirk, "And I promise no technical difficulties in the studio, right?" The audience laughed, but it was an awkward, uncomfortable laugh. Mariah stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said quietly but firmly, "You know what, Jimmy? I don't think you do get it, and I don't think you're taking this conversation seriously. I've been in this business for over 3 decades, and I've dealt with people like you the entire time. People who smile to my face and then make me the butt of the joke. I'm not doing this anymore." Jimmy's smile faded. He said, "Mariah, come on, don't be like that. We're just talking. It's a talk show. This is what we do. We laugh, we joke around. You've been on talk shows before. You know how this works." Mariah stood up from her chair. The audience gasped. She looked directly at Jimmy and said, "Yes, I do know how this works, and I also know when I'm being disrespected. You invited me here under the pretense of promoting my music, and instead, you've used this platform to belittle me. I don't need this, and I don't need you." Jimmy stood up too, his hands raised in a placating gesture. He said, "Mariah, please, sit down. Let's talk about this. I didn't mean to disrespect you. I swear, it was just a joke. Can we please just continue the interview? But Mariah was already unhooking her microphone. She placed the microphone on the chair and said, "A joke is only funny when both people are laughing." "Jimmy, I'm not laughing." The studio was silent except for a few nervous coughs from the audience. Jimmy looked genuinely panicked. "Now," he said, "Mariah, please, I apologize. Really, I do. I crossed a line. Can we just sit back down and start fresh? I promise, no more jokes about the past. We'll only talk about the new album, your tour, whatever you want. Just please don't walk off." Mariah paused for a moment, considering his words. The camera crew didn't know where to point their cameras. Some stayed on Jimmy, others followed Mariah, and the whole scene felt chaotic and unscripted in a way that live television rarely is. She finally said, "You see, that's the thing. Jimmy, you say you apologize, but you don't actually mean it. You're apologizing because I'm leaving, not because you understand what you did wrong. There's a difference. If I sit back down, what's to stop you from making another little dig, another little joke at my expense later in the interview?" Jimmy ran his hand through his hair, clearly flustered. He said, "Nothing. I swear, nothing. I will be completely professional. You have my word. Mariah, you're one of the greatest artists of all time. Everyone knows that. I have nothing but respect for you. I was just trying to be entertaining, but I see now that I hurt you, and that was never my intention. Please." The audience started clapping, as if trying to encourage Mariah to stay. Some people even shouted out things like, "Stay, Mariah," or "We love you." But Mariah shook her head slowly. She said, "I appreciate the applause. I really do. But this isn't about winning the audience over. This is about principle. When you disrespect someone, there are consequences. You can't just say sorry and expect everything to go back to normal. I've spent my entire career being told to smile more, to laugh at jokes made at my expense, to not make waves, to be grateful for whatever platform I'm given, and I'm done with that. I'm not doing it anymore." Jimmy looked around helplessly, as if hoping someone from his production team would step in and save the situation. He said, "Okay, I understand. I really do. But what do you want me to do here? Do you want me to apologize on air? I'll do it. I'll tell everyone watching that I was out of line. Would that help?" Mariah crossed her arms and replied, "It's not about what you say to the cameras, Jimmy. It's about how you treat people when you think you can get away with it. You thought this would be easy. You thought you could poke fun at me, get some laughs, and I'd just roll with it because that's what guests are supposed to do. But I'm not just any guest." Jimmy's tone became slightly defensive. He said, "Look, I poke fun at everyone. That's my job. I've made jokes about actors, musicians, politicians, everyone. It's not personal. It's comedy. You're taking this way too seriously." And that was the wrong thing to say. Mariah's expression hardened even more. She said, "So now I'm too sensitive. That's your defense. I'm overreacting. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You make someone uncomfortable, and then when they call you out, suddenly they're the problem. No, Jimmy, you're the problem. Your lack of awareness is the problem." The audience was completely split now. Some people were nodding in agreement with Mariah, while others looked like they thought she was being unreasonable. Jimmy could sense he was losing control of the situation entirely. He said, "I'm not saying you're too sensitive. I'm saying that maybe there's a misunderstanding here. We're both passionate people. We both care about our work. Can't we find some common ground?" Mariah laughed bitterly and said, "Common ground? Jimmy, you just spent the last 10 minutes making fun of one of the most humiliating moments of my career, and now you want common ground." Jimmy's frustration started to show. He said, "It wasn't 10 minutes, Mariah, and I wasn't making fun of you. I was referencing something that happened. There's a difference. You're acting like I attacked you personally, and that's not what happened." The audience murmured at this. Some people gasped, sensing that Jimmy had just made things worse. Mariah took a step toward him and said, "You're right. It's not a personal attack. It's worse. It's casual disrespect. It's the kind of thing you do without even thinking, because you've never had to consider how it feels to be on the receiving end. You've never been mocked for years over something that wasn't your fault." Jimmy threw his hands up and said, "Okay, fine. You know what? Maybe I don't get it. Maybe I can't understand what it's like to be Mariah Carey, but I'm trying here. I'm really trying, and you're not giving me any room to make this right. What do you want from me? An hour-long apology? Should I dedicate the whole show to saying I'm sorry? Because at this point, I don't know what else to do." Mariah's voice was steady and calm as she said, "I don't want anything from you, Jimmy. That's the point. I don't need your apology because it doesn't change anything. What I need is for people to stop thinking they can treat me however they want just because I'm successful." Jimmy looked at the audience, then back at Mariah. He said, "This is insane. We're on live television, and you're turning this into a whole thing over a couple of jokes. Do you realize how this looks?" Mariah smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. She said, "How it looks? I'll tell you how it looks. It looks like a woman who knows her worth finally standing up for herself. It looks like someone refusing to be disrespected on national television. And if that makes me difficult or dramatic or whatever label you want to put on me, then so be it. I've been called worse. Jimmy's tone shifted to something closer to pleading. He said, Mariah, I admire you. I really do. But you're making this impossible. I apologized. I tried to move on. What else can I do? You're putting me in a position where no matter what I say, it's wrong. Mariah replied, maybe that's because there is no right thing to say at this point. Jimmy, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to use me for cheap laughs. Actions have consequences, and this is yours. The tension was unbearable. Jimmy looked at his producers off camera, clearly hoping for some kind of intervention or commercial break. But the show was live, and there was no escape. He turned back to Mariah and said, all right, you know what? You're right. I messed up. I shouldn't have brought up the performance. I shouldn't have made jokes about it. I'm sorry. Not because you're leaving, but because I genuinely see now that it was wrong. Is that good enough? Mariah studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face for sincerity. She said, it's a start, but here's what you don't understand. Jimmy, this isn't just about tonight. This is about a pattern of late-night hosts thinking they can say whatever they want about their guests as long as it gets a laugh. A pattern of women in entertainment being held to different standards than men. A pattern of people like me having to constantly prove ourselves even after decades of success. Jimmy nodded slowly and said, I hear you. I really do. And you're right about a lot of that. But I'm not the enemy here. I'm just a guy doing a comedy show. I don't wake up every morning thinking about how to tear people down. I'm trying to entertain people. Sometimes I get it wrong. Tonight, I got it wrong. I'm owning that. But you walking off doesn't solve anything. It just makes both of us look bad. Mariah's eyebrows raised at that. She said, both of us look bad. No, Jimmy, you look bad. I look like someone with self-respect. There's a big difference. The audience was riveted. Some people had their phones out, clearly recording what was happening. Jimmy noticed this and said, great, so now this whole thing is going to be all over social media in about 5 minutes. Everyone's going to have an opinion about this. Mariah shrugged and said, let them. I've been dealing with public opinion my entire life. I'm not afraid of it. What about you, Jimmy? Are you afraid of how this makes you look? Because you should be. This is the kind of moment that defines how people see you. Not the jokes you tell, but how you treat people when things get real. Jimmy's jaw tightened. He said, you think I don't know that? You think I don't realize that this is a disaster? I'm standing here, on my own show, being lectured in front of millions of people. Do you think this is fun for me? Mariah's voice remained calm. She said, no, I don't think it's fun for you. But maybe it's necessary. Maybe you need to feel uncomfortable for once. Maybe this is what it takes for you to actually understand what you did wrong. Discomfort is a teacher, Jimmy. And right now, you're getting a lesson. Jimmy looked exhausted. He said, okay, fine. You've made your point. You've taught me a lesson. The whole world is watching. Can we please just move forward now? Can we salvage something from this interview? Mariah tilted her head and said, why? Why do you want to salvage it? Because you're embarrassed. Because your producers are panicking. Or because you actually care about making this right. Jimmy paused, clearly thinking about his answer carefully. He finally said, all of the above. Honestly, yes, I'm embarrassed. Yes, my producers are freaking out. But also, yes, I do care about making this right. Not just for the cameras, but because I respect you. I've always respected you. Mariah seemed to soften slightly at this. She said, if you respect me, then respect my decision to leave. You can't force me to stay here and pretend everything is fine when it's not. That's not respect. That's you wanting me to make you feel better about your mistake. Jimmy rubbed his face and said, so that's it. You're just going to walk out and leave me here to deal with this mess alone. Mariah replied, it's your mess. Jimmy, you created it. Why should I stay and help you clean it up? You're a grown man. You can handle the consequences of your own actions. The audience started murmuring louder now. Some people were clearly on Mariah's side, nodding and whispering in agreement. Others looked sympathetic toward Jimmy, as if they thought Mariah was being too harsh. Jimmy noticed this division and said, see, even the audience is split on this. Some people think you're right. Some people think you're being unreasonable. Doesn't that tell you something? Mariah looked out at the audience and then back at Jimmy. She said, it tells me that people have different perspectives. But I'm not interested in a popularity contest. Jimmy, I'm interested in being treated with respect. If some people don't understand that, that's their problem, not mine. Jimmy took a deep breath and said, all right, Mariah, I get it. You want to leave, you can leave. I'm not going to beg you to stay anymore. But before you go, can I just say one more thing? Mariah crossed her arms and said, go ahead. Jimmy continued, I think you're incredibly talented. I think you're a legend. And I think you deserve better than what I gave you tonight. I hope you know that my intentions were never to hurt you, even if that's what ended up happening. I hope someday you can forgive me for this. Not for my sake, but because holding on to anger doesn't help anyone. Mariah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm not angry, Jimmy. I'm disappointed. There's a difference. Anger fades. Disappointment stays with you. And right now, I'm disappointed that after all these years in the industry, I still have to deal with this kind of treatment. I'm disappointed that you didn't think before you spoke. I'm disappointed that I had to stand up for myself instead of you just knowing better in the first place." Jimmy looked down at his feet, clearly affected by her words. He said softly, "I'm disappointed in myself too." Mariah picked up her purse from beside the chair and said, "Then learn from this. Do better, next time. Treat your guests like human beings, not punchlines. And maybe, just maybe, think about the impact your words have before you say them. That's all I ask." Jimmy nodded and said, "I will. I promise." Mariah gave him one last look, a mix of sadness and resolve, and said, "Goodbye, Jimmy." She turned and started walking toward the exit. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. A few people started applauding, but it was scattered and uncertain. Jimmy stood there, watching her leave, and then turned to the camera. He looked directly into the lens and said, "Well, folks, that's not how I expected tonight to go. I owe Mariah Carey an apology, and I owe all of you an apology too. This was supposed to be a fun interview, and instead it turned into something else entirely. I take full responsibility for that. Mariah, if you're watching this later, I truly am sorry. You deserved better." The camera stayed on him as he struggled to figure out what to say next. He cleared his throat and said, "We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll try to, we'll figure it out." But Mariah hadn't left the building yet. She was standing just off stage, listening to Jimmy's words through a monitor. She heard him apologizing on air, and something in her expression shifted. One of the producers approached her nervously and said, "Miss Carey, I'm so sorry about what happened. Is there anything we can do?" Mariah looked at the monitor, watching Jimmy fumble through his words, and then she looked at the producer. She said, "Tell him I'm still here." The producer's eyes widened, and she quickly grabbed a headset, relaying the message to someone on set. Within seconds, Jimmy's earpiece crackled to life with the news. His face changed completely. He looked toward the side of the stage and said into the camera, "Wait, hold on. I'm being told that Mariah is still here. Mariah, are you really still here?" Mariah walked back onto the stage, and the audience erupted. This time it wasn't scattered applause. It was genuine excitement and relief. People stood up, cheering and clapping, as she made her way back to her chair. Jimmy looked stunned but hopeful. He said, "I didn't think you'd come back." Mariah sat down and said, "I wasn't going to, but then I heard what you said, and I realized that maybe you do understand, at least a little bit." Jimmy's relief was visible. He said, "I meant every word. I really did." Mariah nodded and said, "I believe you. But here's the thing, Jimmy, an apology is just the beginning. What matters is what you do after this. How you treat your next guest. How you approach comedy. Whether you actually learn from this or just move on and forget about it." Jimmy leaned forward and said, "I won't forget about this. Trust me, this is going to stick with me for a long time." Mariah smiled slightly and said, "Good. It should. Now, if we're going to continue this interview, we're going to do it my way. No more jokes about the past. No more trying to get cheap laughs. We're going to have a real conversation about my music, my career, and the things that actually matter. Can you do that?" Jimmy nodded eagerly and said, "Absolutely. Yes, whatever you want. This is your interview now. I'm just here to listen." The audience settled back into their seats. The energy in the room completely transformed. Mariah took a breath and said, "All right then, let's start over. My new album is called Reflections, and it's about looking back on everything I've been through, the highs, the lows, the moments that broke me and the moments that made me stronger. Every song on this album is deeply personal. I wrote or co-wrote every single track, and I poured my heart into it." Jimmy listened intently and said, "That sounds incredible. What was the hardest song to write?" Mariah thought for a moment and said, "There's a song called Enough that was really difficult. It's about setting boundaries and learning to walk away from situations that don't serve you anymore. It's about knowing your worth even when the world tries to tell you otherwise." Jimmy nodded thoughtfully and said, "That feels especially relevant right now." Mariah gave him a knowing look and said, "It does, doesn't it? I wrote that song months ago, but it feels like I've been living it tonight." The song is about empowerment, about refusing to shrink yourself to make other people comfortable. And that's something I've had to learn over and over again throughout my career. Jimmy said, "I can only imagine how many times you've had to stand up for yourself in this industry." Mariah replied, "More times than I can count. But each time gets a little easier. Not because the situations get better, but because I get stronger." Jimmy asked, "What do you want people to take away from this album?" Mariah's eyes lit up as she spoke. She said, "I want people to feel empowered. I want them to know that it's okay to demand respect. It's okay to walk away from things that hurt you. It's okay to be confident in who you are and what you've accomplished. For so long, especially as a woman, I was told that confidence was arrogance, that standing up for myself made me difficult, but I refuse to accept those labels anymore. This album is my way of saying I am enough, exactly as I am, and I don't need anyone's permission to take up space." The audience applauded again, and this time it felt genuine and supportive. Jimmy said, "That's a powerful message, and I think a lot of people are going to connect with that. When does the album come out? Mariah said, "It drops next month, and I'm going on tour to support it. I'm so excited to perform these songs live and connect with my fans. They've been with me through everything, and this album is really for them. It's a thank you for their loyalty and their love." Jimmy smiled and said, "They're lucky to have you. And I think after tonight, a lot of new people are going to become fans too." Mariah laughed softly and said, "Well, if nothing else, this will definitely be a memorable interview." Jimmy laughed too, a real genuine laugh this time, and said, "That's an understatement. I don't think I'll ever forget this night." Mariah said, "Neither will I, but you know what? I'm glad I came back. I'm glad we had this conversation, as difficult as it was, because I think it needed to happen. Not just for us, but for everyone watching. People need to see that it's possible to have hard conversations and come out the other side. They need to see that accountability matters." Jimmy said, "You're absolutely right, and thank you for giving me the chance to make this right. I know I didn't deserve it, but I'm grateful you did." Mariah replied, "Everyone deserves a second chance, Jimmy, but not everyone gets a third. Remember that?" Jimmy nodded seriously and said, "I will, I promise." They continued talking about the album, about her creative process, about the collaborations she worked on. The rest of the interview was respectful, engaging, and authentic. The audience could feel the difference. This wasn't just entertainment anymore. This was real. This was human. As the interview wrapped up, Jimmy said, "Mariah Carey, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for your honesty, your courage, and for this incredible new album. I can't wait for everyone to hear it." Mariah smiled and said, "Thank you for having me, Jimmy, and thank you for listening." The audience gave her a standing ovation as she stood up, and this time when she walked off the stage, it was with her head held high and a sense of victory. Jimmy watched her go, and then turned to the camera one more time. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Mariah Carey. What a night, what a conversation. I learned a lot tonight, and I hope you did too." The show cut to commercial, but the moment had already been captured. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation and the resolution were spreading across social media. People were debating, discussing, and dissecting every word that was said. Some praised Mariah for standing her ground. Others thought she overreacted. Some admired Jimmy for apologizing. Others thought he should have known better in the first place. But everyone agreed on one thing. This was television history. This was the kind of moment that people would be talking about for years. So what do you think? Was Mariah right to walk off, or should she have handled it differently? Do you think Jimmy's apology was sincere, or was he just trying to save face? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the most dramatic moments in entertainment. This is the kind of real, unfiltered content you won't find anywhere else. So make sure you're part of the conversation. Who do you think came out on top in this clash?